Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, and I'm here today with my co-host, as always, Jeff Cohen. We are excited for today's episode. Today, we are doing a MLB trade deadline White Sox special. This is a big week for the White Sox. Here we sit recording on July 22nd. The trade deadline is next Tuesday, July 30th. This is going to get crazy, Jeff. I'm super pumped. There's a lot to happen. The White Sox are one of the number one, if not the number one seller in the entire market around Major League Baseball, and they are going to dictate a lot of this trade deadline. There's two huge pieces as well as a variety of other useful pieces that the White Sox are going to be looking to trade. We're not sure yet if those big pieces are end up getting moved, but there's a lot to consider. We're going to go through every single asset the White Sox have, talk about potential fits, potential mock trades. I've got some mock trades, some ideas, just some prospects that I'm really keyed in on that I would like the White Sox to bring in from whatever teams they trade with. So we are going to dive all the way into that. We've got a few small things to talk about off the top, though. The draft concluded last week. We had a full draft special with Dylan Barnes and myself that really went into every single pick. We're going to briefly mention that. Then we're going to go through Brooks Baldwin's first few games in the major leagues. Drew Thorpe has been dominant once again, as well as some brief headlines around the league before we just dive full into the trade deadline. Jeff, how you doing today? And are you ready for this big episode?
Well, it's really exciting. It's an exciting time for White Sox fans and especially after last year when they made some phenomenal trades. And, as I'm fond of saying, they really set the bar high for our expectations. If they can pull off this year in terms of hitters what they did last year with pitching, it'd be awesome. And I'm kind of expecting that that's what they will do. I'm curious to hear some of your trades. I've got all my top 20 lists printed out beside me so I can keep up with you. And before we transition to talking about potential trades, want to get just 2 minutes of your thoughts wrapping up the draft.
Yeah.
Because when we talked about it a week ago, it was just after the first day, and you were a little apprehensive, a little concerned. I'm wondering if you're feeling a little better about
things. So day 3 made a lot of sense to me. I'm still, now that the numbers have started to come in, we've seen every single pick aside from the top 4 is now signed. So we've seen some of the figures come in, and I'm still a little bit confused. I feel like overslot, they spent overslot money on some picks that I didn't really think were going to be overslot, and some picks I even thought were going to be underslot maybe, where I thought they were even going to save a little bit on some college guys, and that they ended up paying at or above the slot actually, which is pretty fascinating to see because I really didn't think the money from day 2 was going to be very big because my assumption was that some of the money from day 2 was going to get spent on day 3. The reality is there's only been 2 guys from day 3 that have gotten anything over the assigned $150,000. So there's been a few over signings, but ultimately what it's going to come down to is those first few picks asked for a lot of money. And I think the world of college baseball has changed a lot. These high school guys can say, we don't need to go to the league. Like, we can just go make a ton of NIL money at our huge college commitments. And these college guys can say, yes, you are a junior in college, but they could always go back to school another year. And that's a weird little concept that didn't used to be a thing. It was always like, oh, you get drafted as a junior. You don't have leverage really because you're not going to get drafted anywhere in the first 3 rounds as a senior. Now it's like you can go back to college and make a ton of money and still get drafted the year after and have teams have less worry about you being a year older. So it's a tricky situation. The draft is very complicated and it's going to continue to get even more complicated, frankly. But overall, I'm not upset about the draft. I think there was some good things done. I think the usage and the allocation of the money in the draft was not quite as sharp as it could have been and not quite as good as it was last year. But generally speaking, I think overall there was some really interesting talents. There's some really good players coming into the organization, and there's going to be a lot of guys that we're going to have our eye on down the stretch. And ultimately, a lot of advanced college guys. I think the approach was, moldable pitchers and already advanced hitters. That was kind of this angle of the draft where you get a bunch of pitchers with stuff that needs crafting almost, and then some hitters that are older, more advanced college guys that really have a kind of already developed their game and just need to keep improving, but are already further along in their development process. I like the ideas there. Time will tell, Jeff. That's where it's at.
So, I've got a lot of confidence in Mike Shirley, and the last couple of years, not only has he done well in the first couple of rounds, but I think his strength is in the second and third day. So I'm curious, given that, any sleepers that you'd like to?
There's definitely some guys for sure. That really, once I started seeing the third day picks come in, I saw a lot of, upside talents in the third day. Pierce George is a guy that I'm super high on. That was the biggest overslot from day 3. Right-hander from Alabama, 102, has touched 103. A guy that's going to be a reliever most likely, but he's the type of guy that if his command continues to trend in the right direction, it wasn't good in college, but he had a really good time on the Cape previous years. Like if his command trends the right direction, you could see him as a big league reliever like pretty dang soon because he can touch 102, 103. And then there's some other guys in those backgrounds. Nathan Archer's an outfielder that I really like. I'm a big fan of his. Mason Moore is a pitcher from Kentucky who I think has a lot more in his kind of arsenal to develop. I think he was a good college pitcher and started at SEC in an SEC school, so he has that kind of high level experience, but could really grow a lot. Lyle Miller Green is a fascinating guy that Sox fans have kind of already latched onto on Twitter. Fifth year senior, so a much older 23-year-old guy, kind of that Tim Elko mold. 30 home runs last year, ridiculous power, hit a ball 483 in college. Guy that just absurd power. Obviously, when you're 23 years old getting drafted, you need to develop really quickly, or else it's kind of too late at that point. But like that's a guy who's going to tear through Kannapolis and Winston most likely. There's a lot of interesting picks in the back half of the draft. I think there's Blake Shepperton's a guy that I'm a big fan of, another relief arm pitcher, but someone with very minimal college pedigree at all, but was played in the MLB draft league this year and really looked good. So there's a lot of guys, but I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun draft class. I'm looking forward to interviewing some of these guys in the near future here, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I'm pumped because at some point in August, I'm going to see a lot of them in
A lot of them.
Kannapolis.
I think a lot of that roster is going to be in Candy pretty soon, actually. So let's dive into the minors real quickly before we get into our entire trade deadline breakdown. Just briefly right now, heading into this week, only 3 games this past week for all the affiliates because of or 2 games, right? Only 2 games. No, 3 games. Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the affiliates because of the All-Star break where they all get a little bit of a break themselves. But going through the records, Charlotte comes in into this week at 43-50. Birmingham comes into this week at 49-41. Winston-Salem comes in at 43-47. And then Canny wraps it up with an excellent record of 53-37. The ACL White Sox are 23-33, and the DSL White Sox are 10-23. So that's where we're at. We're going to zoom through the ranks real quick because we want to get into our trade deadline stuff. Briefly, Chicago. Brooks Baldwin gets a call up. Super pumped to see Brooks get a call up last week. That's a guy that we have been talking about all year, Jeff. Everybody who listens to us knows how much we've been praising Brooks Baldwin all season. Hasn't had a great weekend. 3 games in. I'm not reading anything into that. He had a hit. He had first major league back. He got a hit. Doesn't have a hit since then. Let's give him some time. I don't want to even talk about it really too much until we get 2 weeks into his big league career, at least.
You know who he reminds me of is his path to the major leagues is a lot like Romy Gonzalez, a late round pick, goes to Birmingham, middle infielder, tears it up, comes to Charlotte for just a cup of coffee, like a week or two, just like Baldwin, and up to the major leagues. Unfortunately, injuries have kind of derailed his career, but I think he's finally getting a bit of a chance in Boston. But
Yeah.
I remember talking to him after he went up for a couple of weeks, and I said, hey, were you nervous? And he said, for my first 10 at bats, I really couldn't even feel my legs. And so I'm thinking, yeah, let's give Brooks a little time. He's probably a little overwhelmed right now.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm not worried about him. I'm excited to see what he can do, and I think he deserves at least a few weeks to really get everyday reps, which he has so far. So we'll see what happens with Brooks, but pumped to see him in Chicago, another piece of the future who could hopefully establish himself down the stretch this season. One more guy to mention in Chicago, and then we're going to get to Charlotte quickly. Drew Thorpe, Jeff, it's just ridiculous stuff. This guy, I don't know if you saw this tweet of mine that this yesterday or last night. Do you know who has the lowest batting average allowed against in Major League Baseball in the last month?
Really?
Last month, Drew Thorpe is allowing a 127 batting average, which leads all qualified pitchers in Major League Baseball in batting average against.
Wow.
Yeah.
I finally got to watch one of his most recent start, and I got to tell you, it's the first time I've seen him pitch extensively in Chicago, and nothing was near the middle of the plate. Everything was on the black. It was just impeccable control. And
yeah. It's pretty ridiculous. Since that one game, he got blown up his second career start, and since then he's like, he hasn't been perfect, but like this is a guy who's going to give you quality 6 innings every single time he touches the mound, pretty much, and that's something that is extremely valuable, right? Like he's not striking out 12 guys a game. He's never going to be that guy. He's not Dylan Cease, right? But as the headliner of that Dylan Cease trade, Drew Thorpe is going to get you innings and give you a chance to win every single game. And the White Sox aren't winning because the offense doesn't do anything, but that's besides the point. Looking forward, like if Garrett Crochet gets traded, Drew Thorpe is guaranteed the opening day starter, in my opinion, next year. Like he's been that good, right? I mean,
I mean,
if assuming Crochet and Fedde are out the door, nobody else has a chance, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
fair.
he's that good. He's
Yeah.
been that good. So we'll see what happens, but I'm pumped to see what Thorpe has done so far. Really, just a walking quality start in the definition of it. Going down to Charlotte real quick. Anything of note briefly in the last 3 days in Charlotte, Jeff?
Uh, let's see. I guess apropos of nothing, Chucky Robinson was called up, and
Sure.
that's a feel good story because he's been really under the radar all year as their best hitter. And I remember when Edgar Cuero came up and I asked him how his adjustment was going. He said, "Thanks to Chucky, Chucky had been a real help to him get to learn the pitching staff." And so, hats off to him.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So that's been solid. Charlotte's gonna be fun to watch. The lineup there is still pretty exciting, and there's a pitcher there every day that's good. Jake Eater with a rough first start in Charlotte, hoping to see him bounce back next week. But there's pitchers there that are interesting every day. Going down to Birmingham, two pitching performances on a doubleheader on Saturday that were just excellent. Their first game of the week gets rained out. They have a doubleheader with Iriarte going game one, and then Noah Schultz going game two. Iriarte leads a combined 7 inning no hitter with Garrett Shanley. Iriarte with 5 innings of no hit ball, 6 Ks. He was phenomenal, Jeff. That's a guy who spent all of last week in Chicago, actually, right before the All-Star break, right? Took a week off from Birmingham, was in Chicago with Eater and Mason Adams and Juan Corella. Iriarte came back looking the best he's looked in a while. He had a rough month of June and into July a little bit. His past 5 or 6 starts have been kind of shaky. And then Iriarte comes back from his trip to Chicago, and the slider was more deceptive than it's been in the past month or so. Really sharp, better fastball command than he's had recently. He just looked phenomenal. And then typical Noah Schultz, just being great. The strikeout numbers for Schultz are a little bit lower than they've been in the past, but he still just limits guys, makes it bats really uncomfortable, minimizes contact. Like, it's just great stuff from Schultz, like always. Those two really impressive starts, and I'm pumped to see kind of them make more starts in Birmingham. They're both probably going to finish out the year there.
Yeah. Little trivia for you: Garrett Shanley started a no hitter.
Yeah.
7 Charlotte Knights pitched,
Yep.
and in fact, there were so many pitchers in and out of the game. They had no idea. Most of them had no idea they had a no hitter. But
Yeah, that's what they were saying.
Trivia for them.
Pretty funny stuff. So that was cool. That was a good game in Birmingham. Those two games back to back were excellent games for the Barons. And then heading down to Winston-Salem. What's up with Winston-Salem this past week, Jeff?
Well, I was happy to see Shane Murphy have a nice bounce back
He
start.
did have a nice start.
And Juan Corella also looked pretty good. And again, he was another one of the guys who just went and spent some time with Brian Bannister. So looks like that's really paying off.
100%, definitely. Another guy to mention, Peyton Pallette with 2 innings of 4 strikeout ball in one of the games for Winston. Peyton Pallette, the reliever, is a different pitcher, Jeff. I kind of mentioned it early in the year. I've thought this for a little while. He really couldn't find it this season as a starter. Peyton Pallette as a reliever might be heading to Birmingham sometime this season, to be honest. You don't want to rush it because he did have such a tough first few months of the season, but the reliever version of Peyton Pallette could be moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. This 2 innings, no hits, no walks, 4 strikeouts. I mean, you can't ask for much.
Yeah, definitely.
And then a couple other things real quick about Winston-Salem. Eddie Park with his first home run. We haven't mentioned his name in quite a while. So
yeah, it has been a little while.
Yeah, hopefully he can get going.
Yeah, and DJ Gladney had a nice little weekend too. I saw Gladney had 2 home runs this weekend, I believe. So Gladney's a guy with a ton of power that I've always been a personal fan of, but just been kind of waiting for some of the consistency to click for him. But some good starts from Corella, from Murphy for sure. Another good start from Lucas Gordon. So Lucas Gordon's made himself comfortable in Winston. He looks good. So solid stuff all around from Winston this weekend. Heading down to Canny, Jeff. Take it away. Canny's got a lot of new players. They're going to get a ton of new players soon. We're going to see at least 7 guys, I would say, if I had to guess, of the college core of draft picks heading to Canny pretty soon. So that roster is going to keep getting different. They're going to keep improving. What did you see from them this week?
So I caught 2 of their games, even though one of them was rained out after 2 innings, but I got to see 2 innings of Jake Peppers. And I was really impressed. Man, what a big fastball. 96 to 98, and a nice slider to go with it. And I talked to our guy, the voice of the Cannonballers, Dan Haloti. I said, has he had this fastball all year? And he said, he is normally the Wednesday starter, but he didn't start until Saturday. So he got an extra 4 days of rest. And as we talked about, a lot of these starters have not missed a turn all season, and they're probably starting to wear down. And he said it was clear that Peppers was the beneficiary of 4 extra days of rest. And
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I thought, yeah, I mean, he's had a good year as the fifth starter on that team. I mean, he's got a mid three ERA, but I thought, worst case is this is a really good reliever, and that's his floor.
And
So
that's not the thing is, like, I think we get in this rhythm of thinking that's, like, worst case, like, with guys like Paulette, with Peppers. That's not worst case. The reality is Major League rotation is 5 guys, and the White Sox have 15 really good pitching prospects in their system right now. Like, some of these guys are gonna have to be relievers, and the profile of Peppers, the second they drafted him and the second I talked to him, like, that profile is a guy that could be not just good, but, like, really good in the bullpen. Like, that slider fastball combo out of the pen could be nasty, and, like, yes, right now, let him make starts for sure. Keep him stretched out, let him make those starts, see what happens. But as more guys get up and you start to see kind of he's behind a lot of these other guys, right? The reality is, like, he's still behind a Keener. He's still behind a Lucas Gordon from his own draft class, Grant Taylor when he's healthy, right? Guys like Iriarte, Adams, Schultz, like the Corella, this list goes on, right? Like if he it, I don't mind Peppers next year becoming a reliever and being a really good one because that's a guy that could shoot through your system as a reliever. It's just like we're mentioning with Paulette. So good stuff there. I know Walkow had some pretty impressive at bats too. You got to see some really good George Walkow content. The guy's just advancing. Like it's really cool to see his approach and his general ability at the plate just continue to get better. Like he's adapting better. He's learning how to lay off some breaking balls a little bit better. When you give him a fastball, he's crushing it. I mean, almost every ball he hits, like sometimes when he really barrels up a fastball, it's like, oh, that's going out or to the wall pretty much. Like it's that double he hit this weekend was like, I thought it was gone for sure because it was 107 off the bat and it was too much of a line to get out. But like he's just crushing the ball and he just looks like he's continually improving and adjusting.
yeah, it was a lot of fun going. I went to the Friday night game when Batista pitched. It was an interesting start. Because he looked sharp and he had went 6 innings and only gave up 4 hits, but no strikeouts, but still he looked really good. I love that fastball of his. It's just got such great tailing action. But it was so much fun watching Wolkow in that game
Yeah.
because he in one at bat he had a 3-0 3 ball no strike count. They gave him the green light and the pitcher threw him a fastball, and I think that's the one that he about knocked that I thought was out
Yeah.
of the well that Caden went for the double, but a bases clearing double.
Right. Exactly.
And then the same thing, he had a 3-2 count in another at bat, and again the pitcher tried to throw him a fastball. And I mean,
Yeah.
it was a hard single. I bet it was almost as hard as that double.
Yeah, no, so really, really impressive stuff all around. Canny's just been fun to watch, and it's going to get even more fun when you're going to get some of those draft picks down there. I mean, Hagen Smith is probably he might just skip over Canny and go to Winston. To be honest, he's that talented. But other than him, like he could be in Canny, but a lot of other guys are going to get some innings and some innings Canny on the bump, and some guys to been put in the bottom half of that lineup. Right, like there's even more talent on the way in Canny, so that's going to be really fun to watch. Let's get into our main topic for the day, Jeff. I'm ready. I'm pumped. I'm fired up. We're going to go through every single candidate that the White Sox have to trade at the deadline. We're going to talk about where they could go. We're going to talk about potential packages for them. We're going to start on the pitching side of things because I do think every pitcher of value essentially is going to get traded at this deadline, other than obviously like Drew Thorpe and not the rookies, right? But like every experienced pitcher with any sort of value is probably going to get moved at this deadline. And then we'll go into hitters. Hitters are a little bit trickier. I mean, you've seen this offense this year. Everybody knows there's not a ton of assets and true assets on the offensive side of the ball, but there is guys that are going to get moved, and obviously one big potential candidate if they decide to make the move if somebody ponies up. But we're going to start pitching. Garrett Crochet, Jeff. It seems more and more likely that he's going to get traded by the week. I think all indications are that the price is still high and the price is going to remain high, but this is the highest his value will ever be. The White Sox are going to be very, very strict on their price. They're not going to budge. They're going to get an offer that's good. But if the time to cash in is now, you cash in now and you take a strength of your team, which is pitching. You just drafted another star lefty in the first round of the draft at 5th overall in Hagen Smith. You take your ace, you cash in when you don't know the future of his arm. The only thing is, like, some teams are going to also be weary because of the arm stuff, right? But like he hasn't. Yes, like logically, he should be getting decreased innings and he should start to wear down a little. He hasn't though. So like at this point, he's still an ace and he's one of the 10 best pitchers in Major League Baseball this season, right? So like the price is going to be high. It's going to take a team that is not only a contender, but a team with an elite farm system that has the depth to trade from, and a team that is willing to take some risk. And like this is not going to be a team that's like we're not going to see certain teams in the market for Garrett Crochet because certain Major League organizations just operate with minimal risk. So this is going to take a good farm system, a team that needs a starting pitcher, and a team that's willing to take some risks. The obvious fit is the Orioles, Jeff. But I'm not sure the Orioles are risky enough as an organization to make this move. Can they make it? Yes. Can they make it without even hurting their major league team this year? Yes. And they are probably the only team that cannot affect their current year or even next year at all while trading for Garrett Crochet. But are they going to be risky enough to make that move, Jeff?
I see them more as a Fetty uh, a
Yeah.
contender. That's it's a safe pick for them. They're going to give up a good prospect, and they have shown they hate to do that. But
Right.
Fetty's a nice, safe choice for him, and I think he'd be a great addition. The thing about Crochet, I am curious, is yeah, it takes a team that's got the capital to trade for him. But if you're an opposing GM, how confident are you about sticking him in the rotation and giving him 8 to 10 starts?
Yeah. Um, you're weary, right? Like you have to be a little weary. It's tricky. I think, in my opinion, the way I would handle him if I was in the shoes of a team trading for him is I would let him make those starts, just cut them off early and continue to cut them off early and limit his, give him 4 innings to start. Say, ultimately, like we're not trading for you for the regular season. We need you capable of pitching in the playoffs because that, like, it's tricky because you don't want to burn his arm out and you want to keep him pitching and keeping his reps up. But it's like you're not trading for Garrett Crochet with the intention of just making the playoffs. Like the teams trading for him are teams that are going to be in the playoffs with or without Garrett Crochet, right? Like that's not the issue here. The issue is you need him to be capable of pitching come playoff time, whether it's in a multi-inning relief role or a starting role, whatever. Like you need his arm healthy for the playoffs if you're making that type of move. So it's going to be tough. These are the 5 teams I listed, and I wanted to just get your take on this because I have 5 teams I listed that I really think these are the only 5 teams that are capable of it. I know people have mentioned the Yankees. I just don't see the Yankees trading for an ace. I don't love their prospects enough, frankly, and I don't think they have enough of leverage in a situation to make the move. So I have listed the Orioles, the Dodgers, the Phillies, the Brewers, and the Padres. Those are the 5 teams I can viably see trading for Garrett Crochet. I think the Orioles are the fit, right? But in terms of like value, the Dodgers make the most sense, Jeff. And that's so crazy to say. And I know the Dodgers have there's this rumor of this dream package between packaging Crochet, Robert, and Kopech. And I don't see it. I think it's silly. I don't think it makes any sense for the White Sox. You don't cash in on all your guys at the same place. You take them to multiple stores and you cash them in at different locations. Like that's my opinion. But Crochet for the Dodgers makes some sense. The Dodgers have 2 pretty consensus, top 50-ish prospects in Dalton Rushing, a catcher, first base guy, Josue De Paula, who's a little bit lower on national rankings, but Josue De Paula is someone that I'm a big fan of and I think is really high upside as a player. They've also just got a deep system per usual. This is the Dodgers, right? Jackson Ferris is a pitcher that I really like. He's come on with a huge year. Zaire Hope is someone that I think is very underrated, an outfielder traded from the Cubs last year to the Dodgers, has had some injury stuff, but is really a tools out, center field type guy. Kendall George, last year draft pick, has had a solid first season, has room to grow. Yohendry Vargas is an international guy who's super talented. They've got a bunch of ACL and DSL guys, and Geral Perez, Emil Morales, Albertson Alturas. They've got a bunch of different guys. Really, they truly do. And the Dodgers have a blend, right? They've got a mixture of your league ready, more talent, right? You could throw in a pitcher like a Nick Frasso, a River Ryan, some pitchers that are, pretty ready. Or you can go for a Dalton Rushing, who's also going to be a bat that could be up in 2025. But they've also got all of that upside with guys like DePaula and Hope and Vargas. And there's so many guys you can look at and just dream on as potential bats for the future.
Yep, yep. Yeah, they've got a deep system and typical Dodgers, a lot of great pitching prospects. You're right. You mentioned River Ryan, Kyle Hurt, Landon Knack, Peyton Martin, just
Yeah,
tons
Peyton
of
Martin's great.
arms in the upper levels. So Alex Freeland, another guy getting a lot of helium right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you come up with a specific package?
For Crochet, it's tough. I had more of a Robert package prepared. This is one that I wrote. I wrote this one for Just Baseball a little while ago, and I'll pull it up because I don't remember the exact package. I'm curious. I'm trying to think about like what a deal would look like. This is one that I published 3 weeks ago, so I think some things have kind of changed to a degree by then. But I do think it's very viable and possible to make that happen. The package that I put together for the Dodgers, let me pull this up and see where I'm looking at. Josue De Paula, who is the Dodgers, top outfield prospect. Zaire Hope, who is I believe, really underrated in my opinion. Yohendry Vargas, and then I included Justin Robleski. That was before he got the big league call up, but realistically, they're not gonna trade someone who's in their current rotation. I think the Dodgers would rather trade a lower prospect. So I think if there's a way to pull a package centered around DePaula, Hope, and Vargas, and a throw-in pitcher, some sort of pitcher you can add into the mix that's interesting, that's a lot of upside. It's a risky package, though. That is three guys who are all super young still. So I think you probably need more of a sure thing. Someone like either like a Trey Sweeney, maybe. I think Trey Sweeney is someone who could be up soon. Or, I mean, maybe it's Dalton Rushing. I don't see the Dodgers moving both Rushing and DePaula. I think that's kind of a stretch. So I'd rather have DePaula because I like his upside, and I think he's that potential future all-star outfielder, which the White Sox don't have in the system right now. I think DePaula, Hope, Sweeney plus a pitcher like maybe Peyton Martin, something like that, could go along the lines. Maybe you switch up one of those guys, throw in one of those, flyer young guys and a Joral Perez or Emil Morales, something along those lines. The thing with the Dodgers is there's so many possibilities there.
Right. Well, I was looking at RotoWire's top 20. I like the guy who does that, James Anderson, and he's got DePaula ranked third, Hope fourth, and Vargas eighth in their system. And, you can get three of the Dodgers' top eight prospects. That's
Exactly.
strong. That's very strong.
And then mentioning some other packages on the other side, like the Orioles, it comes down to, are they willing to trade Samuel Basallo? I know the White Sox fans, you'd love Jackson Holliday or Kobe Mayo. It's not happening. I hate to break it to you. Jackson Holliday and Kobe Mayo are going to be hitting in October for the Orioles, and those are not guys they're going to be willing to move because they know those guys are ready to help them this year. Samuel Basallo is not going to help this year. So if you can get a pitcher that you really think is going to be a big part of the team without trading a current impact bat, then maybe you think about it, right? If Basallo's involved, this is when I wrote up also for Just Baseball. I wrote up Basallo, second baseman Connor Norby, and pitcher Luis De Leon. If you can get a guy like Basallo headlining the deal, that's the best prospect you're going to get from any of these teams, right? Like that is the elite prospect. You got to get more than that because you can't hitch the entire trade on one 19-year-old catcher, right? That's why you get a Connor Norby. Connor Norby can slide into second base. I mean, I know Brooks Baldwin's there right now, but Connor Norby can slide into second, third, short, wherever you want to, however you want to move the infield around. Connor Norby can play every single day in the White Sox infield the rest of this season going into next year, right? That's a guy who's, outside the top 100, but borderline top 150 in baseball probably, right? And had a big league cameo, right? Didn't get much time. They don't have room for him. And that's the reality. They have Jackson Holliday and Kobe Mayo. They don't have room for Connor Norby, and he's way too good to just sit in AAA for the next year and a half. The White Sox should have Connor Norby today. Luis De Leon is a young pitching prospect in the Orioles system, has had a pretty good season. That's more of the throw-in, right? But somebody that I still think is a pretty solid pitching prospect and could develop more. That's the Basallo route. Or with the Orioles, if they are just refusing to move Basallo still, you could pivot and go the route of depth, right? You could get a package with Enrique Bradfield, Connor Norby, Dylan Beavers, Judd Fabian. I'm just mentioning some of those guys off the top, right? They've got a ton of hitting prospects. They've also got a few high-end pitching prospects. If you want to go the route of, a whoever it might be, whether it's Chase McDermott, I'm not sure they want to move Chase McDermott, but Chase McDermott is a borderline top 100, pitching prospect, right? They've got some other guys at the lower level. Seth Johnson has come on big this year, is really interesting pitching prospect to keep an eye on. There's some other guys as well. There's who is it? Jackson Baumeister is another young pitching prospect from last year's draft who has really been impressive in his first professional season. So there's a lot of guys there in Baltimore. This is the best system in baseball for a reason. It's just, the big question with that is there a world where they move Basallo? Because if there's a world where they move Basallo, then that becomes the number one trade target is the Orioles. Because if they'll move Basallo, you can tack on a few other guys from the middle section of their system, and that's a pretty dang good package already, Jeff.
And so I don't know if it's in the Crochet trade or a Fetty trade, but if you're in a deal with the Orioles and you can get Norby, that's a great add to your lineup. Yeah. Even if you can't get Basallo, if you can get Norby as the headline. And then I think, importantly, we have talked along for many podcasts about the lack of outfielders in the White Sox system. And you mentioned four really good ones.
Yep.
Dylan Beavers, Bradfield.
Yeah.
Fabian.
Fabian. There's a lot of outfielders in that system. Any of those guys, you're probably not getting a Kerstad because Kerstad's now with the major league team. He's hurt right now, but maybe they trade a Kerstad. That would be awesome, right? But like now that he's shown he's ready to help at the major league level, the Orioles don't want to do that. That's the thing. They don't want to give up guys that are helping them now. They're going to have to then give up some of those high upside guys that aren't helping them now because they have too many hitters. They don't have enough spots for the amount of hitting prospects they have that could be impacting the team. So it's like you got to move some of the younger guys. I think Bradfield makes a lot of sense for the White Sox. I think that's the contact speed type of outfielder that you could really dream on. There's a lot of pieces there. I think those two teams are still the best two fits for Crochet, but I want to mention the other few because I do like some of these other ones. The Phillies are interesting because the Phillies don't need a starter. The Phillies have an amazing top four in the rotation. If the Phillies go into October with Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, and Christian Sanchez as their four starting pitchers, like they're in a pretty good spot. Like that's a really good core four rotation. If they really just want to push it all the way in, they could swing a trade for Crochet. They've got the top pitching prospect, Andrew Painter, coming off of Tommy John. I don't think that makes sense for either side really to move. But when you go past that, the Phillies 2, 3, 4 are guys that I've mentioned them multiple times on this podcast. I mentioned them online. Like my mock trades have them in like Aiden Miller, Starlin Caba, Justin Crawford, three young hitting prospects. Miller and Caba are infielders. Miller is probably more of a third baseman long term. Caba is definitely a shortstop long term. While Justin Crawford is a high upside outfielder who just got promoted to Double A. If you can find a way to get those three, or even two of those three, and then some, that's also a really good package. Aiden Miller is a phenomenal hitter. He's who I wanted the White Sox to draft last year in the first round when they went Jacob Gonzalez, and I really still am a huge fan of Aiden Miller. I think Starlin Caba is that super high upside, just athletic, twitchy, young like infielder. And then Justin Crawford, son of Carl Crawford, is big league bloodlines, a ton of speed, still needs to kind of tap into more of his power. He has more power than he's shown, but a guy that as an outfielder should be a premier outfielder in terms of athleticism and speed and should continue to gain some more power as he ages. Like, it's hard to avoid that. And then you go beyond that, right? You look at, so I first of all, I know we're going through each team here. I apologize for taking so much time, but we're going to, as we mention these teams later, because these same teams are going to come back up, and then you're going to be familiar for our listeners. You're going to be familiar with a lot of these prospects already, and we won't have to go through it again. And then you look at a team like the Brewers. Milwaukee's my sneaky team because Milwaukee doesn't like spending. They're not a fan of spending, and you never know what they're going to do at the deadline. But the Brewers are in a position to make a run this year. Like, they have that division in a really good position. I don't see anybody else other than the Brewers winning the NL Central at this point. And they have the system to really make a swing and make a move at someone. They traded Corbin Burns last year, and they lost Brandon Woodruff to injury, right? Like, their rotation has still kind of just been getting pieced together most of this year. What happens if you give, the Brewers Garrett Crochet to pitch alongside Freddie Peralta on the top of their rotation going into the rest of the season? I mean, that could really change their outlook for Milwaukee. I think there's a lot of pieces there I like as well. Tyler Black, someone who's just been blocked all season in terms of just not having a role there. He's just a power hitting infielder. Has played some outfield recently in the minors, which is interesting. But Tyler Black could instantly slide into the White Sox lineup, similarly to Connor Norby. Like, Tyler Black could be in the White Sox lineup tomorrow and be one of the better hitters in it. Luis Lara is a really high upside outfielder. He slotted into the Just Baseball Top 100. I don't think he is on Pipeline, but he's a really high upside, just athletic, twitchy outfielder. They've got a ton of young guys to dream on. Joffrey Rodriguez is a guy like Cooper Pratt is a guy from last year's draft who's been exceptional this season. Eric Brown, Brock Wilkin last year draft pick. Mike Bovey is a guy that's had a huge breakout. Brent Wicharowski is a pitcher who's came out of nowhere last year. Weird little Mason Adams trajectory where he was a 13th rounder last year and has been exceptional this season in his first professional season. They've just got pieces on pieces. Milwaukee, they really do have a very underrated farm system in my mind. I think that's a top 5 system or so in baseball. And I think if it's not the headliner, right? Like, you're not getting a headline piece from Milwaukee, most likely. Maybe Jacob Mizorowski's in play. Maybe. I don't think so. I also just don't think it makes sense for either side as much. But with Milwaukee, you get 4 hitters that are all, high-end prospects in the White Sox system.
Yeah. You're right. The Brewers have a sneaky, deep farm system.
Yeah.
With a lot of young hitters.
A lot of young hitters.
Yeah.
And that's what the White Sox need, right? Like, you got to take some swings. I know you want some stability, right? And that's why Tyler Black, I think, as the first piece in that deal is kind of a necessity, because you want a piece that can help you now and going forward. But the rest of those hitters, there's just a lot to dream on and a lot to really like there. Crochet, I mean, the Padres have been in on him. The Padres are a weird situation because, like, I think like 22 of their top 30 guys are pitchers, which makes it really complicated to trade with that team because they're not trading Ethan Salas, the catching prospect, 19 or 18-year-old phenom. And then beyond that, they're probably, I don't think it's hard. I'm not sure where they would trade. I think Leo DeVries would have to be involved for a Crochet trade, right? Like that doesn't. I'm not sure how you get a Crochet trade in without DeVries being involved, just because that guy is, high level international signing. They spent a ton of money on him. Other than Salas, he's their only truly high end offensive prospect. 17 years old, Jeff has already been kind of coming on really strong lately in single A. So pairing DeVries with Walkow and Canny would just be like the coolest thing ever to watch. But that's a guy that would probably have to be the headliner for the Padres to get a deal done because the rest of their top prospects, Robbie Snelling, Dylan Lesko, those are pitching prospects who both are having kind of, underwhelming years after big years last year, right? So it's a hard system to trade with. I don't see anything happening with the Padres unless DeVries is actually involved, which I just don't know if you want to do that from an organizational perspective. Like the Padres they're a mediocre team right now. They're fighting for a wild card spot. Are you really going to trade your 17-year-old shortstop of the future hope hypothetically? Like it's
Well,
tough.
the only thing is, this is the team that traded James Wood,
Yes, it is. It
and
is. You're right.
and so they'll trade their top
They will.
prospect if they
They
see
will.
somebody they want.
Yes. Unfortunately, Garrett Crochet is not quite Juan Soto, and it definitely more risk than Juan Soto. But
Sure.
you're not wrong, and they've traded a lot of prospects in the past. I mean, they traded Drew Thorpe. We just saw like they are willing to make moves. They've been a partner with the White Sox in the past multiple times too, with the Cease trade just happening this year. So I wouldn't count them out. I like them more for somebody we're going to mention later though. But moving on from Crochet, that was we kind of gave a brief of all five of those teams that could be an option. I don't see anybody else outside of those five. I think maybe there's a world where the Yankees, maybe there's a world where like Houston, but I don't think they have the prospects for it. I really don't see anybody outside those five having a real shot. Maybe St. Louis if they really just want to go all in and try and make a wild card spot. But again, another team that I don't really think has the pieces for it, and I don't think they're competitive enough to make that move. You gotta to justify a Crochet trade, you have to be in legitimate contention tier, which is why I really think it comes down to Baltimore, Dodgers, Phillies, or maybe the Brewers, but not even probably. But those are the teams for Crochet. Going on to Eric Fetty, is it fair to say that every contender in Major League Baseball would like Eric Fetty, Jeff? Because I think that's pretty fair, right?
Absolutely. I mean, he's had a solid year. There aren't that many guys with his numbers on a team. Every playoff team.
7.5 million next year, right? You've got another year of him too. It's not like you're buying a rental. You're trading for a guy that's been this good. Like I get it. Yeah, he only has a half a year of proven results in the major leagues, but like clearly this is not the same pitcher as before he went to Korea. And like he has another year of control at an extremely affordable price, has been nothing but a solid middle rotation guy all season. You can slot him into the third game of a playoff rotation and feel pretty good about your chances to have a good game from him, I think.
I could see him having a bigger return for the White Sox than Crochet.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
Well,
No chance.
I
There's
mean,
no chance.
but he's got so much value. I mean, this is a guy who's going to go out there every fifth day. You can start him in a playoff game. I really think he's. I mean, what other starting pitchers are out there that you can think of that someone would take over Fetty? I mean,
I
there
think
might
I think Jack Flaherty is one of them for sure.
yeah.
I think if Scooble's on the board, but I don't think Scooble's going to get moved. I think Scooble's like there's a chance, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think who else am I thinking? I think Flaherty's ahead of him.
Maybe
Yeah,
maybe a couple of Rays guys, but I don't think they're
yeah, maybe. I mean,
I
if
don't
the
think they're-
Rangers decide to sell, then you're looking at Scherzer, Eovaldi, some of those guys that would be ahead of him. But other than Flaherty, I mean, maybe a few others. But yeah, no, you're not wrong. Maybe Kikuchi, the Blue Jays, he's been really good lately. But like, yeah, you're not wrong. I don't disagree with you. I think Crochet is like the difference is like Crochet is a guy that can win you a playoff game. Fetty's a guy that can keep you in a playoff game. I think that's kind of the swing there. Where like if you're talking upside, like Crochet is the highest upside pitcher on the market, which is kind of where it differentiates. But I hear you for sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking that a guy like Fetty, I mean, he can easily net you two, a top five and a top 10 prospect from another system. And again, if you're talking about a team like the Dodgers, you're talking about some really nice prospects.
Yeah.
Being a Phillies, I mean, maybe you get Justin
Yeah,
Clark
definitely.
deal. Yeah.
all those teams we mentioned are definitely in play again for Fetty, right? Like all those 5 teams I mentioned for Crochet as well. But other teams I want to mention in addition to those five, the Red Sox, if they decide to sell, I'm not sure they're going to, but they could be. They definitely seem like a team that would want to add a controllable pitcher as opposed to a rental. Um, if you want to trade in division, the Guardians would probably be a perfect fit for Fetty. I would kind of hate that because it's the Guardians and it's in the division, but like technically they would be a really good fit. Houston would make a lot of sense as a team without a top farm system, but you could trade two of their top few guys, right, for a Fetty. I think St. Louis makes a lot of sense for Fetty. I honestly think St. Louis is probably one of the best fits for Fetty just because they can trade a few prospects without having to dip into their whole system. St. Louis is a team that I think, going back to, we'll start with St. Louis and then I'll go back to the Astros. St. Louis has a variety of guys that are interesting. Thomas Sagisi is a guy that has kind of struggled this year in AAA, but last year looked like he was going to be kind of pretty ready for the bigs. Just a really impressive hit tool type of infielder. Another guy that could be up with the White Sox this season. There's some other guys on that team, that org, that I like as well with the Cardinals. Chase Davis, they could take a chance on a bounce back from a guy who was a first rounder last year and hasn't had the best start to his career, but a lot of upside there. Cooper Jerpy is someone who was another draft pick from 2 years ago, first rounder. Someone that has really come into his own this season and has got bumped up to Double A recently. It's another pitcher of interest. There's other guys. Travis Honeyman is a guy that I really like. I think that's someone who was a third rounder last year, fell in the draft after a shaky last season of college, but someone who has been really good this year, was dominating rookie ball, got up to single A, and has been good so far coming off of an injury. There's some guys there in St. Louis. It's not a high-end farm system, but for a Fetty, you're not going to get that, there's no chance you're getting a Basayo type guy, right? Like you're going to be getting, I don't want to sell him short, but I also know it's like you do need some degree of proven results. And I do think Fetty's due for a little bit of regression. So ultimately, I think you're getting, two pieces for Fetty probably. But I think the Cardinals can make sense. I don't think they have elite guys, but I think you could get two of their top 8 guys and be a pretty good package. Same thing with Houston. I think Houston's the same way. I really like, in terms of if you just want to know, I mean, not to make it too opinionated on my end, but I really do like Jacob Melton a lot. I think Jacob Melton, the Astros' top prospect, is a really interesting guy. Bryce Matthews is a fun player to watch. Someone who kind of coming off an injury this year, sped his way all the way to Double A. Was their first rounder last year. There's a variety of guys with Houston too. I think who's the other one? Luis Baez, I like, another one of their top hitting prospects. The Astros have a pretty weak system, all considered, but those 3 hitters are all pretty interesting. If you could find a way to get 2 of those guys for Fetty, that's a pretty good package. And Houston definitely needs an arm. That's a team that's 100% going to be looking to add a pitcher. I think Atlanta makes some sense. That's another team with a pretty weak farm system, but I think you could. I'm not opposed to trading with a weaker system with the Fetty deal, because a weaker system, you could really get some of those top end guys from their system. It might not be a good system overall, but you could poach 2 of their top prospects,
Do you think the Orioles would give up Norby and Bradfield for Fetty, and do you think that's a good return? I think
I
it'd be
would I
awesome.
would love that. I would love that. I think more like a Norby and Beavers is probably more likely. I think they're probably going to be a little hesitant, which I would also be really
I
okay
would
with.
love that. I mean,
Even a Norby and Fabian would be pretty good. Also, honestly, Fabian's probably the lesser of those 3 outfield prospects. But if you can get a Norby and an outfielder, one of their outfielders, that's a pretty good deal. And that's the thing with the Orioles. Like they like the Astros and the Cardinals. I'm talking about the Cardinals and Astros top 2 or 3 of their 5 prospects in their system, right? Like
right.
Norby and Beavers and Fabian aren't even in the top 5 for the Orioles. I don't even think Bradfield's in their top 5 until some of those guys graduate, right? Like the Orioles have the ability to trade for a stud pitcher without hurting their team one bit. And that is what is so valuable about their position. And for their sake, I hope they do it because they're good. That team is exceptionally talented, and it's not going to be easy for a market like the Orioles to re-sign and give extensions to guys like Adley and Gunnar. Like those guys are going to demand $400 million contracts. Are the Orioles going to be able to keep that core together? I'm not sure, frankly. So but capitalize on your moment right now, Orioles, while you have all these young hitters on rookie contracts. Like, make something happen, please, Baltimore. I think if it's not Crochet, Baltimore is the perfect fit for Fetty as well. And I think there's a lot of other teams that could too. I mean, I mentioned some of those so far, but like there's even more, right? Like the Cardinals make sense. I think the Brewers, if they don't want to go all in for Fetty, or for Crochet, but they want a pitcher, the Brewers could also make a ton of sense. Tyler Black plus one of their young single A hitters, like. That's a deal for me. If I can get Tyler Black for the White Sox, who immediately slots into the lineup, plus a Cooper Pratt or a Joffrey Rodriguez, who have tons of upside, low level guys, like I'm taking that deal as well. There's really a ton of teams that could make the move for Fetty. Every single contender is at least going to give a call about Fetty.
Oh, absolutely. But the more I think about it, the more I think he's just the perfect kind of guy for the Orioles. They're not,
Yes,
it's a solid guy, a decent floor, and they're just not going to take. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong
I,
because I'd love to get
right.
the
No, I
prospect.
feel the same way.
Yeah, and if that's the guy that they target, yeah, a return like Beavers and Norby, it'd be awesome. I mean, they'd be two of the top 10 prospects in the White Sox system.
Instantly. And hitting wise, right? Like they would be up. Norby would be up immediately. I think Norby would report straight to Chicago. I don't even think they would. Maybe they'd send him to Charlotte for a few weeks, but like you could send Norby straight to Chicago, and Beavers will be up next year. So it's like there's like that makes sense. It really makes a lot of sense. But ultimately, like Fetty could go to any team. Like he truly could go to pretty much any contender that needs a pitcher. I think the Phillies, right? If the Phillies throw a White Sox one of those top three hitters in addition to another piece, like if the Phillies called the White Sox and said, we'll give you Starlin Caba in addition to one of our, middle system guys, I'd have a hard time saying no to that as well because you need upside hitters. The deadline, especially after this draft, like the White Sox entire deadline will be defined by how many impact hitting prospects they add. I'm not talking about flyers, right? Like flyers are nice at the back of a deal. Legit hitting prospects who will slot into the top half of the White Sox farm system. That is what they need to find, and that is what they need to target, especially when it comes to Crochet, Fetty, and Robert. You have got to get impact hitting prospects one way or another.
And it's even more urgent as a result of the draft because they have the number 5 pick, and yeah, they got another pitcher. He's great. He fits the mold of what the White Sox like, but they could have gotten an impact bat there, and they chose not to. So they need to get one in a trade.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then heading down, we'll go to our next pitcher. We're going to breeze through these next few pitchers because the rest of the pitching is pretty just, you get what you can get. I do think the White Sox are going to get something from Michael Kopech, though. I really do because I think teams are going to want to take him that upside. But the stipulation there, I think he could package with a Crochet or a Fetty, and that would be great because I think you could tack him on to a deal with a team that also wants another reliever with a starter and really maximize some value there. If you have a Kopech with a Fetty, it's like, oh, you've got Fetty, but you've also got, if Fetty regresses a little bit, here's a guy that could blossom into a stud in the bullpen if things go well for him, right? So, like, there's trade-off there in packaging guys, but I do think Kopech packaged onto one of those two could work really well, or package with another reliever. Maybe I could see that as well. But Kopech's got to go to an organization that has a good history developing pitchers. And I say that because, he's not a young guy. You're not developing him like you develop a prospect. But if an organization can look at Kopech, and like the White Sox, I'm not saying the White Sox haven't. I love the White Sox pitching development, and they've done some good things with him this year out of the bullpen. He just needs a fresh set of eyes. I think a team that really has a good staff and trusts themselves to develop pitchers will get him in the lab and will get him working and just see what they can do with him, right? Like that's going to be a hard task, but it's a task that could result in a really good relief pitcher come October, right? Like he could be an impact pitcher out of the bullpen for a playoff team, right? And like he's not the most consistent, but I could see it clicking for Kopech and him being a stud. The teams I have listed, Jeff, are the Yankees, the Orioles, the Cardinals, the Dodgers, and the Padres. Those are the 5 teams I have listed. Highly established organizations, teams that have done good, teams that are consistently contending, right? Consistently developing pitching, all of the 5 of those teams, and would be willing to take some risk on a guy that they can put in their bullpen. All of those teams have established closers too. I want to make sure to mention that as well. Those are teams that don't need him to close at all. And he can be a 7th or 8th inning guy that can come in and pump 100, and they can develop his off speed a little more and see what they can get from him.
Yeah, sounds great. And I know we'll get to this toward the end of our podcast today, but I'm sitting here thinking, is it possible that they walk away from this draft with Justin Crawford, Connor Norby, a couple, Zaire Hope? That's
There's some pieces.
So exciting. And that's very possible. That's very possible.
It is very possible. Kopech ultimately, I think, is probably you're looking at like a top 15-ish system prospect. I think it's probably a 1-for-1. I don't think you're getting 2. Maybe you get a flyer as well, but probably a guy that's like 10 to 15 in most of these systems. Maybe in addition to maybe like a rookie ball type of flyer as a second piece. But assuming he's packaged by himself, or if he's packaged with someone, you're probably getting a top 10, 15 guy added into a bigger package of a Fetty guy, right? So we'll see. I think someone like if you're looking at like the Yankees, I would really I'm trying to think of the right guy here that I'd like from the Yankees. I'd really like an Arias or a Maeda, one of their super Roderick Arias or Brandon Maeda, two super young high upside guys. Maybe a Brock Selvage, who's had a really good year as a starting pitcher for the Yankees. Everson Pereira is another guy that I wouldn't mind as well. None of those guys are top 100 guys, but all those guys are upside guys. Pereira is more of a big league ready outfielder. Arias and Maeda are more like, the long term project guys that could have some fun. But if you're going for a Kopech guy, I'd love a high upside. I might be shooting a little too high for Kopech, honestly. I think I'm probably kind of being a little bit too aggressive there. Maybe a Rock Riggio, last year draft pick, I could see being more realistic from the Yankees side of things. He's hard to evaluate because somebody might look at Kopech and say like, oh, this guy can be our eighth inning guy in the rest of the season, right? In which case they can get a solid prospect. And other teams might look at him and say, this guy just doesn't have the command. He gives up too many home runs. We don't even want to mess around with that. We don't need that much risk in our bullpen come playoff time, right? So like, it's hard to gauge. That's why ultimately I think you maximize his value by tacking him into another package. That's kind of the way I see it going for Kopech. We'll breeze through the rest of these guys. Chris Flexen, as well as the rest of the bullpen. Tanner Banks, John Brebbia, Steven Wilson. The hope at the beginning of the season is that some of your veteran relief signings would turn into legit prospects. That's not going to happen. Unfortunately, this bullpen has been the worst in baseball this season. It's been atrocious all year. Chris Flexen, I think, is someone that makes sense for teams dealing with injuries, right? Like I think I literally just wrote that. I think any contender dealing with injuries, Chris Flexen's a guy that can be a spot starter. He can be your 5 starter for some games if you've got injuries. He could be a long reliever in the bullpen. He's been pretty good the past 2 months, to give him credit. I mean, he hasn't been bad at all in his past 2 months. He had a rough start this week. But generally speaking, he's been, a serviceable 5 starter or long relief guy, right? So like I can see him getting some innings for a contender. Realistically, for Chris Flexen, you're getting like a flyer single A guy, and you're going to maybe he turns into something, right? Like the White Sox got Juan Corella for Kenyon Middleton last year, who was having a better season than Chris Flexen, but like you could get back top 30 or a little bit outside the top 30, like single A type guy for Flexen. Same thing with Brebbia. Brebbia is a veteran. He's had pretty good results over the most of his career. So I think that's the one reliever you could get something for. Maybe someone takes a flyer on Tanner Banks. Maybe same thing with Steven Wilson. Realistically, though, these guys are the type of guys you add into a package to sweeten a deal. And, you're not getting a direct prospect, but if you add in a John Brebbia with Eric Fetty, you could say, oh, instead of that could be the difference between Judd Fabian and Dylan Beavers, right? You could say like, oh, we don't want another prospect, but instead of Fabian, we're going to give you Brebbia too and bump it up to Beavers, right? That type of thing where you can bump it up a prospect almost by adding one of his pen arms.
That'd be great.
So
let's look at a couple of hitters real quick.
Yeah, we're going to start with the big one. We're going to start with the big one, Jeff. Let me ask you this first. Like, what do you think Luis Robert's market looks like right now? Because I've been wrangling with this, and like he hasn't been bad this year, but he hasn't been 2023 Luis Robert. He's coming off an injury. The team's just terrible. Like I don't think you can expect anybody to hit that well in this lineup right now with no protection at all. But like I still think there's a heavy enough market for a guy that like this is a guy that was one of the best players in baseball last year for stretches, right? So like it's hard to gauge his market. I'm not sure. I really don't think he gets moved. But if he does, I think there's 3 teams. Do you know those 3 teams? Because I think there's only 3 teams that have a chance at all, to be honest.
I think one of them is Seattle.
Yep.
And they've got some interesting hitting prospects. And
yeah, we haven't talked about Seattle at all yet because Seattle doesn't need pitching. They need no pitching whatsoever. They could run their current rotation and bullpen into the playoffs, and they would be fine. Their lineup is freaking terrible. That lineup
not Ty France today.
Yeah, that lineup is absolutely atrocious. If there was a team to do this and there was a team to just say, screw it, we are going to trade for Luis Robert. We're going to make it happen. We need to win this division. It's enough of Houston running us over every single year. Like, this is the team. Like, I don't see why they wouldn't. I get it. It's scary, and they have developed a really good system of hitting prospects. This is the team that needs a bat. If there was going to be a team to make a trade for an elite hitter, I'm not talking about adding, an average little random offensive piece. Like, they're not adding a nobody. If a team was going to add a big time hitter, and I think it could end up being a Rays guy. I think the Mariners have also been linked to Isaac Paredes and Randy Arozarena, which would also make a lot of sense for them. Yeah. But if there's going to be a team that needs to add a superstar bat, it's got to be Seattle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
then the other 2
are a dying need for it, and they've got the system to make the deal.
We'll go back to their system.
They've got a general manager who's not shy about doing deals.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Depoto's done it in the past, so hopefully he would. The other two are the Phillies and the Dodgers. We've been talking about them this whole episode. Like those two teams are like clearly the two best teams in the National League right now. Like, yeah, the Braves are still very much in it. The Brewers are very much in it, but like the Phillies and Dodgers are the cream of the crop in the National League. Both those teams need a starter, and both those teams could use an outfielder. Like those two teams make perfect sense for both Robert and Crochet and Fetty. All of, like those two teams are going to be on the line with Chris Getz all week. I think those three teams are the only teams I see making sense. I don't think there's another team in baseball that has the money, the need, and the farm system to trade for someone like Luis Robert. I really do think it's those three. I still don't think he gets traded. My gut tells me he doesn't get traded. But if it's going to be anybody, it's going to be one of those three. We've talked about the prospects on Philly and Los Angeles. Seattle's got a lot of guys, Jeff. So this is where Seattle's at with their system. I'll try and give a brief rundown, and then I want to get your take on it. They've got two elite shortstop prospects, Cole Young and Colt Emerson, two guys that are a 2022 first rounder and a 2023 first rounder. These guys are really high end, top 50 in Major League Baseball, shortstop prospects, maybe second. Both of them kind of could move to second and or third as they get older. They're both going to be like studs. I don't think Seattle's going to move Cole Young under any circumstance because I think they think he's going to be ready as soon as next year. And then Colt Emerson is more doable, I think, though. I mean, he's having an extremely good year, but he is in single A. He's not necessarily as advanced as Young. I think that's possible. Harry Ford is interesting, but I don't think the White Sox want a catcher. He hasn't had a great season. I don't love his offensive profile either as much. I think you want more of an impact bat, and you don't need the catcher because you have Caro in the wings right now. When you go down the line, they've also just got a ton of these young, projectable guys. Lázaro Montes is an absolute beast. This guy's probably a DH, which White Sox fans are not going to want to hear because I think that's the thing where you get a little weary, but like he could maybe transition to first base. Generally speaking, like this is probably a DH long-term with Montes. But it's super impressive stuff, just offensive profile is just off the charts. And then they've got other guys like a Johnny Formello, who was a first rounder last year as well, or a PPI last year. Formello tore his ACL earlier this season, but a guy you could buy low on and really impressive prospect. A Ty Pete was another, a CBA pick last year, basically a first rounder as well. Another infield prospect who has had a pretty solid year in single A. You've got a guy like Felnin Celestine, who's, a rookie ball guy who's just been exceptional in rookie ball this year. So much upside, high level international signing. Michael Arroyo has been a good utility infielder this season in the high A level. It just keeps going. You really go down their whole system and you see a lot of just upside hitters. You could package two or three of those guys and be looking at one of the best offers on the table for someone like Robert.
Yeah, absolutely. Colt Emerson and I think Jonathan Classe, yet another good young outfielder. Logan Evans, if they throw in an arm.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's Logan Evans is another guy that's been great this year. He's been exceptional. So I think he's a guy that if you're going to get a pitcher, that's another guy I really like as well. There's just guys in that system. And in terms of fit, that is the most logical fit. Like they just need bats. Like they need bats so badly, Jeff. It's unbelievable. I hope they do it. I don't think they do. I think they're too nervous. I don't think they think this team is ready to win. When is this team going to be ready to win? Because this is 3 straight years where Seattle's been right on the edge of contention and hasn't made it happen. So, like, I don't know. I got to talk to my guys. We have some guys I work with, Marine Layer Pod. They do awesome Seattle Mariners coverage. I got to talk to them and hear their opinion on this because I just don't know what they're going to do. Like, what are they going to do? We'll see what happens. But that team makes tons of sense. The Phillies make a ton of sense. The Dodgers also make sense. The Dodgers always make sense, right? Like those are the 3 teams that could trade for Robert. I don't think he gets moved ultimately. I'm skipping. We're going to do predictions at the end of the episode, but like, I don't think he gets moved. If he does, it feels like it has to be one of those 3 and it feels like it should be the Mariners, but I don't know if they have the guts to do it.
I could see Dave Dombrowski, stepping up. And
yeah,
you're right. I mean, the White Sox are going to have to be given an offer they just can't say no to. I could see the Dodgers doing that, and I could see Dombrowski doing that in Philadelphia. Hard to see the Mariners doing that.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you in general. So we'll see. We'll see what goes there to that direction. Robert obviously is the big trade chip. There's 2 hitters that are definitely going to get moved. I don't know. You're not getting a ton for them, but both Paul DeYoung and Tommy Pham are going to get moved. I think it'd be a shock if they didn't. Both 1-year signings, guys that are basically like they're 1 foot out the door. I think at this point, I think you sign those guys on a 1 year deal, and they've both been decent players. Fam's been a solid right fielder for the White Sox at times. Played some center when Robert was out. Paul DeJong has 16 home runs this year. Like they're not great, and they're not going to be like everyday key players for a contender. But both those guys could slot into a bottom of the order and/or utility bench role for a contending team and really make an impact, right? So I think you're going to get a top 20 to 30 system prospect for both those guys. You're going to get a guy that could plug into the bottom of the system and as a hitter and be a decent option. Some of the teams I put together for Tommy Pham, there's a lot of teams that could use an outfielder. The Mariners, if they don't want to go the Robert route, same thing with the Phillies and Dodgers, right? If those teams all want to add an outfielder, but they don't want to go all in on an outfielder, they could all make sense for Pham. The Braves make a lot of sense for Tommy Pham. I actually think the Braves will be my favorite pick because their system is generally one of the weakest in baseball. You don't need a great system to trade for a guy like Tommy Pham. The White Sox could get a pretty decent prospect in terms of their farm system, right? Because their system is kind of weak. The D-backs could bring Tommy Pham back. The D-backs made a run with Tommy Pham last year. They could use another outfield piece, another guy that can slot into that lineup. The Royals also, I know in division stuff is rare, but the Royals could really use a cheap but useful, outfield bat that they could slot into their lineup. I think they can make sense for Tommy Pham. Those are the 6 teams I had for Tommy Pham. Really, like you're looking at an outfield, either an injury replacement guy or you're looking to upgrade a 4th outfielder. And Tommy Pham, if he's your 4th outfielder and he can get some good defense on the bench, some good pop, especially against left-handed pitching, like that's a really good 4th outfielder to go into the playoffs with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kansas City's is a interesting idea, and also Seattle. I mean, I could see them doing that.
They
Really,
could do. I mean, again, they could find Seattle. Like you could go to the bottom half of their system, and like I don't even know. I'm trying to think of some guys I know in that system that are of interest. Like a guy like Brody Hopkins. I like Brody Hopkins a lot. Like that would be an awesome net. That's a guy who was a 6th rounder last year, has turned in a 3.1 ERA this year in Single A so far. Young, projectable, right-handed pitcher. Like give me a Brody Hopkins for Tommy Pham, and I'm slamming deal. Right? Like you'll get something. Paul DeJong, I wrote down 3 teams. I wrote down the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Mariners as well. The Mariners just need offense no matter some way or another. I'll keep saying it. I put them as a fit for every single hitter on this team, basically, because they just need offense some way or one way or another. The Yankees could use an infielder. I think the Yankees could use just an infield utility type guy. I think DeJong would be a perfect like shortstop, third base, second base, just general backup for the Yankees to give a little bit of veteran leadership, a little more pop in that lineup. They need some sort of offense somehow. And then the Dodgers as well. The Dodgers with Mookie still being out with some other injuries on that team, they could use another veteran infielder to kind of just get some innings at different spots throughout that down the stretch. So I think those 3 make sense for DeJong. I mean, screw it. If the Mariners don't want to spend big, like both DeJong and Pham, package them together, send them to the Mariners, give them a little bit of offense for pretty minimal cost. Like it's something. At least do something, Seattle. Just get something. Those are the 2. Those guys are going to be out the door. The rest of the offense is a little bit more up in the air, but those 2 are definitely getting moved.
all right. So 6. Would you take the under or over for 6 players, 6 White
Okay,
Sox
wait.
players
We'll
traded?
save that question for like 5 minutes. I want to hold off on that question because I want to get to these last few guys, and then we're gonna do some predictions, and we'll
Okay,
get
there's
to that
more.
question.
Okay.
There's a few more because I want to mention a few more guys because there's more to do. We're going long today. I don't care. People can listen if they want. They can skip over some things, but Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn, I'll package them in together here. What does first base look like moving forward? I don't think it's either of them. I would like to see Vaughn continue to find more consistency, but had an amazing month of June, has done nothing in July. It's just a roller coaster with Vaughn, and I'm just not sure that's the guy you want to go into the future core playing first base right now. Sheets has no value. I mean, if I would have traded him in April, to be honest, but that's just me not being a huge fan of his profile. I really never have been. We'll see. But both those guys, they have team control, so at least that's one thing. If you want a controllable bat for a team that could be some power, could be something, she just played an okay right field. Vaughn is only playing first base. They're both first base DH guys ultimately. I don't think there's a huge market. For Sheets, I wrote down the Yankees, Royals, Mariners, and Braves. I think all those teams could just use a little bit of juice. I think a team like the Royals could just use that left-handed power a little bit maybe. A team like the Braves could slot him into some innings in right field, even though it's not ideal, and get a little bit of juice out of his bat. Mariners, offense. I don't need to say it again. Vaughn, I think the Brewers could make some sense for Vaughn. I could see the Mariners as well. I could see the Royals as well, even for a Vaughn, maybe. I don't know what the market is for those two. It's hard to gauge. I really don't think there's much of a market for either of them at this point. I think there's a little bit more of a market for Vaughn probably, just because of his pedigree and because he has shown a little bit more in the past. But really, I would like to move one of those two. I'm not sure what type of value. I think Vaughn, you're probably getting a one top 15, one top 20, 25 in a system, maybe like two top 20 in a system type guys, maybe. Sheets, you're probably getting like one top 20 in a system, maybe a flyer. I don't know. Those two are hard.
Yeah. I wonder if Seattle would have an interest in Vaughn at first base. Because
That's
right
what I'm saying.
now, they dropped France. They're going with
I
a rookie.
I could see it.
Yeah,
There's a chance. Like
yeah.
again, they just need offense. So like whatever way they can get offense, like I think they make sense with the White Sox just as natural trade partners. Like the White Sox can dump. I mean, take Pham and Vaughn together, right? If you want an outfielder to fill some innings in the outfield, a veteran guy, and then you get an upside, still fairly young infielder to slot in, get some innings at first base, get some innings at DH, right? Like I can see it. It's just it's I just don't know what those markets look like. There are two guys that have just continually underperformed, which makes it hard. And then that brings me to three guys who have more than underperformed. I think that's fair to say, with Eloy Jimenez, Yohan Moncada, and Andrew Benintendi. That's the category of like try to get rid of their contract if you can, but you probably can't because ultimately Eloy and Moncada have buyouts at the end of the year. Nobody's picking up those options at this point. If you get either of those players, you're going to have to pay $5 million for Moncada just to buy him out and $3 million just for Eloy to buy him out. So like, it'd really have to be a team just like basically trading nothing and just saying, hey, maybe Eloy will give us a spark for the rest of the season. Like maybe a team like the Mariners would be crazy enough to say, like, we just need some sort of offense. Maybe we can unlock him. He's got upside, whatever. Maybe Moncada's still not healthy. I don't think you're seeing him get moved. Benintendi is 3 more years of that horrendous contract. I don't think you're seeing him get moved either. Maybe a team is crazy enough where the White Sox pay part of the contract and then some team takes half of it back or whatever. Those three are just added in here because I think you're going to try to move them if you're the White Sox, right? Like if you're Chris Getz, you're trying to get off those contracts, but like you're probably not going to.
Yeah, Moncada's not the one. I don't agonize about that because he's off the books at the end of this year.
So is it. So is Eloy
But
too, but it's like
yeah,
it's just a pain because you have to pay. You're gonna have to pay $8 million just to get rid of those guys who were both supposed to be huge pieces of your future and whatnot. So it's frustrating, but we're past the point of being frustrated. Now we're at the point of just deal with it, move on. They're both gonna be gone at the end of the season. It just is what it is, unfortunately.
yeah. I mean, maybe you could give maybe if the Royals give Benintendi to the Royals and you pay half the contract,
Right.
you
So
run
yeah,
with that.
maybe he goes back to his Royals form from a few years ago.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
maybe right. Like you never know. It's hard to gauge, but I don't think any of those guys are getting moved realistically. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to answer your question first of all, and then we're going to go through each player briefly and just say, are they getting traded? If they get traded, where are they headed? 6 was your number for the over under?
Yeah, that's way too low.
That's too low?
I think so.
Yeah, that's probably
I
smart.
can see 6 pitchers.
Yeah, I'll put the line. I'll put the line at 7.5. So either under 7.5 or over 7.5. What do you got there? 7.5 as the line of total players traded.
Let's see. We've got
I calculate myself as well.
all right. So well, who are the certainties? Pham, Kopech,
I think Pham, DeYoung, Kopech, Fetty, Flexen are pretty guaranteed. Those 5.
and Crochet. I mean, some of
I
them.
don't think Crochet's guaranteed yet because I think they have to get value for him. I think it's likely, but I wouldn't put him in the guarantee. I think the guarantee is DeYoung, Pham, Kopech, Fetty, and Flexen. I think those 5 are gone for sure.
Right. Okay. So yeah, 7.5 is the right number.
Yeah,
And,
I still think I'm going over, honestly. Because if you add Crochet, that's 6. If you add probably 2 relievers, I think at least one reliever that gets you to 7, and then even just one more reliever or one more bat. I think Brebbia is more likely than not because I think he has a
Flexen.
Flexen I already put in there in that 5, that initial.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I think 7.5 is about right. I think it's going to be somewhere in the 7-8 players range. And I think it's because by all means, if it's 10, I'll be happy. But I just don't. Those bats are just hard to move. I don't. Robert's the tough one. I don't think you're going to move him unless the Mariners or Phillies really want to pony up. And then Sheets, Vaughn, Eloy Moncada, Benny, I don't think so. I really don't think anybody else is of interest. So I really think on the offensive side, it probably just ends up being Pham and DeYoung, which is unfortunate, but like I just don't know how much else you're getting. The pitching side of things, trade them all for all I care. I mean there's so many pitchers coming up and there's so many pitchers that are ready, right? Like you look, even we've talked about it a few weeks ago, like relievers, even like there's relievers in Birmingham and Charlotte who can go immediately into the rotation and be way more, as good as most of the relievers have been this season. So like Brebbia, Tanner Banks, Steven Wilson, those are guys that like Justin Anderson even maybe gets something. He hasn't been great in the big leagues, but he's been good when he was with Charlotte. Just see what you can get. Throw them into deals, package them with a Fetty, package them with a Kopech, package them with a Crochet or a DeYoung or a Pham, whatever. Like just add on guys and tack them into deals and just try and sweeten prospect packages by adding in those bullpen guys, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Going through Garrett Crochet, does he get traded? Where is he headed, Jeff?
I think he's going to San Diego.
Ooh, interesting.
Because I think Preller's desperate. His job might finally be on
his job's on the line for sure.
Yeah, his job's on the line. He can make deals with the White Sox, and he's not afraid to move high-end prospects.
Yeah, if the White Sox get Leo DeVries, I would be pumped. Garrett Crochet is going to be a Los Angeles Dodger, I'm afraid. That is my gut. That's what I've been thinking for about a month now. I think it makes too much sense. They are all in. They've been all in forever, right? They're always going to be all in. That's the Dodgers. And they have the pieces. They have the hitting prospects. They have the level of desperation right now with all their injuries they've been dealing with. I think Garrett Crochet is a Dodger. I think they're the one team that'll actually pony up and just say, forget the risk. We're going to do it. Eric Fetty, obviously getting traded, in my opinion. Of every contender in the league, Jeff, where's Eric Fetty going?
I really like that fit for the Orioles. I think he's the perfect guy they're going to go after.
I totally agree with you. I think that'd probably be my pick too, but just to be different here and give another option, I'll go Fetty to the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are going to push a little bit, and I think he's the type of pitcher they like. The Cardinals always go for those kind of, consistent stability, older veteran guys, and I think if the Cardinals want to make the wild card, I think that's the perfect guy to slot into the second spot in the rotation and just see what happens. So I'll go Fetty to the Cardinals, but I think the Orioles is probably the best pick there because they really do have all the pieces to make that happen.
Yeah, my third choice would be Atlanta.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I like that too. I just don't love their prospects enough. That's the issue with Atlanta. Right. The Michael Kopech.
Wow.
I'll go first on this one because I have an idea. If the Fetty route goes Orioles, I think Kopech goes with him to the Orioles. So that would be my take. If the Orioles get Fetty, I think they could very easily sweeten a deal and bring in Kopech as well with one of their, mid-level prospects who they have so many guys. I think if Fetty goes to the Orioles, the Kopech is attached to that deal. And I think if Kopech is traded on his own, I like the Padres actually, differently than the Fetty thing. Actually, maybe Fetty could be if Crochet doesn't go to the Padres, then maybe Fetty could also be Fetty and Kopech to the Padres. But I like Kopech's fit with the Padres because they could they have a closer. He would never. Robert Suarez is a beast. They wouldn't have to worry about him closing at all. But Kopech could be. They don't have a lot of consistent relievers. Kopech could go there. I think they could really bring the best out of him and make him a solid middle inning guy.
All right, my gut says maybe Crochet to the Dodgers, but I'll roll the dice and say the Yankees.
I wouldn't mind that either. I think the Yankees, they're always looking to add another arm or two as well. Exactly. I think they've maximized a lot of relievers over the years too. I could see that for sure. Chris Flexen, we can do briefly. Chris Flexen, does he get traded? Where is he headed?
Well, I could see the Orioles being in on a guy like Flexen.
That would make me angry from an Orioles fan perspective, but
maybe Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think I'd go Houston for Flexen. I think Houston's a team that would just they don't expect much from the back end of the rotation, and he could be a guy that can just kind of give them some innings while some other guys are recovering from injury still. I don't mind that fit.
Yeah.
He's pitched in that division before too. He had some success in that division when he was with the Mariners. So I think they've seen a lot of him. I could see that making sense. John Brebbia or Tanner Banks, Steven Wilson, any of those. I think a few of them get traded. It could really be anyone though. I think it's pretty fair to say. Luis Robert, does he get traded? If he gets traded, where is he headed, Jeff?
I just don't. Seattle is such a perfect fit, but I don't think they've got the guts. I don't think they got the guts.
I agree. I just don't think he gets traded. I'm going to go no on Robert.
I think I agree.
If it's a yes, I'm going Phillies. I think Dave Dombrowski is the one guy crazy enough to make that deal.
Right. I think I got to agree with you. Just to be different, I'd say the Dodgers. But
Yeah, but I
No.
think the Philly, if he does, I think it would be Dave Dombrowski just going all the way in and saying we are going to win the World Series. We've been on the edge of it for 3 years in a row. We're going to get the center fielder we don't have, and then our entire lineup is superstars, basically, which
And
would
if
be great.
and if any general manager has the track record, I mean, it's
Right.
him. I mean, that
So
is
if he gets moved, I'm very firm in saying I think it will be the Phillies. I just don't think he ultimately gets moved because I think they're going to be. It's not going to add up in terms of value.
right.
Tommy Pham, where do you think he's heading?
Oh, let's see. I think Seattle.
Yeah, I was gonna go the Braves. I think one of those two makes a lot of sense. I think
Yeah.
I think the I think the Braves make a lot of sense. They need to figure out what to do with their outfield. Acuna out for the year. Michael Harris is out with a hamstring injury right now. I think Fam's the perfect like veteran Braves type of guy that they would bring in, like
Yeah.
they did a few years ago when they won the World Series. Just bring in some vets to fill the holes. I think that makes a lot of sense. Paul DeYoung.
Well, I like your logic about him going to the Yankees. I mean, LeMahieu looks awful this year, and
Yeah,
he could fill that role really easily.
yeah, I'll go Yankees too. There, I think the Young and the Yankees. I also think the Mariners make sense, but I think the Yankees make sense for the Young. Any of Cheats, Vaughn, any all the other guys on the move? You think?
Oof, oof, oof. I just don't know. Maybe the Royals would take
That's
a
that that
shot.
was what I think my gut was the Royals for Sheets, maybe, if that
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, that'd be a cheap left-handed bat for them.
Right.
And again, Seattle. I mean, I could see Seattle going for Vaughn
There's a world.
because
Yeah.
it's not that. It's not like they. It's not just one or two
Yeah.
prospects as opposed to Robert. So yeah,
Yeah, I could see that one. I think the Sheets for the Royals, I think could make some sense. I could see the Brewers maybe swinging a trade for one of those two if the Brewers want another bat. They've had Rowdy Tellez at first base most of the year. I oh no, Tellez is on the Pirates, pardon me, but I think the Brewers could maybe swing a deal for Sheets or Vaughn. I think one of those I could see it,
yeah,
but that's about it. I don't think the rest of them get moved. So we just went through the whole deadline. We did a good job. I know this is a long episode. I hope people bared with us and enjoyed the information we were trying to provide for you. So it's going to be crazy. We are going to figure out either the deadline's next Tuesday, so we'll either record before the deadline or we'll record on the deadline. Maybe we're gonna play around with some ideas. I might have a whole deadline special come out after the deadline, just doing like a full analysis of all the prospects brought back because I'm diving super deep on these prospects. And the second the trades start coming in, I am going to be doing all my research on these prospects and really just figuring out who these new guys are, trying to talk to them, all that stuff. It's going to be fun. I'm excited for the deadline. It's going to be really exciting. We will have all the content you need at FutureSox. Check out Jeff at Triple A Jeff. I am at Elijah EV8 on X. We are going to have deadline content. We are going to have more content from the draft picks. We're going to have a ton of stuff coming up down the second half of the season. In a few weeks from now, we're going to get some in-person content. I'll be out in Carolina with Jeff. We're going to have some really fun stuff going on out there. And there's a lot more coming. So we're pumped. We hope you stick with us and enjoyed this episode of the Roundup. Thanks, Jeff.
all right. Thanks.